I think there is some real challenges for HR functions at the moment. I think there are also some massive opportunities. I mean,
Great.
even if you just look at traditionally, I would say that HR would be more viewed as being orientated towards people rather than necessarily task. And the world has definitely moved. There's been a shift towards, an increase in task-based orientation, whether that's the gig economy, whether it's the increasing use of outsourced services. How do you measure people when they're working remotely? You don't want to put do you want to put a screen monitor on them to find out that they're not watching Netflix, or actually you're going to judge them on what they actually deliver? So I think the people versus task element, I find that very interesting as a bit of a conundrum for businesses to address. And it may be that task sits in one area and people sits in another area, and it needs to be looped up under a central function. Or it may be that HR have the opportunity to address task and how that applies to people. But what's your kind of gut reaction on that side of things?
That's a really good question. Sum that up in a 2-minute answer. I mean, it's a real challenge because, if I'm reaching into my own personal experience, I could make a case for both sides and something different as well. So let's try and agree on some things. A virtual world has made task management more harder to manage for a lot of managers, or a lot harder to see for a lot of managers. And it really depends on the sector and the business that you do as to whether you feel you can measure outcomes easily or not. So if you're somebody who's managing a virtual call center, then you can very easily see the metrics that particular operator has managed in any one period. When they were online, when they're offline, just as it was in a real call center. So managing the task of, how much have they done today and what's the outcomes today? Easy. In the kind of more knowledge economy type work, where you should be measuring on outputs, but I fear too many managers were still managing on inputs. And so therefore having their resources gaggled around them in a nice office was more comfortable to them. That has been a real challenge for those type of managers that like to see the work effort, the input, and probably traditionally have been less comfortable with just measuring by outputs. I think, we didn't need a pandemic to open that up or not. That was a trend that was happening anyway, which was the world was moving more towards an output desire, but still had some leaders. And I spend a lot of time with managers and leaders, and we still have some managers and leaders who would be honest in a quiet coaching conversation, say, this working from home is great, but I can't wait to get everybody back in the office. And, you have a sneaking feeling there that, really why that is. And that's because they want to see inputs, not just try and measure outputs. I think part of it also is because many organizations just aren't very good at managing expectations about output. So what do I expect from a, HR function, for example, over the next year? It's not something that we're very good at. And there's a reason why a lot of large organizations are pulling back on their performance management systems, because they just weren't fit for purpose, because it was neither measuring the inputs or the outputs very effectively, but was a very cumbersome process for many involved.